What do we do now?
We'll figure it out, like we always do.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in The Bad Batch, Episode 9, The Crossing. Now, to be honest, friends, I was not digging this episode at first. I mean, you guys know me. I'm a defender of this show. At its worst, it's still a fun episodic romp, and at its best, it paints a harrowing portrait of how fascism comes to power on the backs of veterans.
You weren't loyal to me.
I thought the 2 episodes last week were great for tying the show into the larger universe.
Tasty Easter eggs, oh boy.
Right, but the episode also showed how Palpatine was able to manipulate the Senate into making itself largely obsolete by the time Andor rolls around.
The senator from Chandrila stands with those in opposition to the Emperor's new public safety legislation.
And even though I want more character-based stories for this show, I wasn't really feeling this episode for a few reasons I'll explain in a bit. But then something occurred to me about this episode, and suddenly I was really into it.
Oh, what's that? Did you go to Detroit?
No, why would I go to... Why Detroit?
I don't know, I just kind of hear people talk about Detroit sometimes.
No, Doug, I realized that this was a bottle episode.
A bottle? What's a bottle episode?
So a bottle episode is when a show typically is trying to save money, so they'll set the whole episode in one place. Like when the Bradys were trapped in a meat locker, or Brian and Stewie in a bank vault, or maybe the most famous bottle episode of all time when Walter White and Jesse spent hours in the lab trying to kill a fly.
I'm doing a bottle episode.
Bottle episodes at their weakest are just clip shows.
Hey, remember that time we met my half-brother who was also a part teddy bear?
I am very cute.
Exactly. But bottle episodes also place your characters in tight circumstances and force them to come to mutual understandings with one another so they can be released.
I'm sorry about Jane.
If you know, you know. In the case of this episode, Tech and Omega exist on opposite sides of the emotional spectrum. He is very analytical and detached from his feelings. It's how he was made, whereas Omega has always been more in touch with her feelings and the feelings of others.
I know it's not your fault. You can't help it.
Is that because she's force sensitive?
I mean, it could be, or it could just be because she's a kid. Omega grew up in Topeka City without anyone around her own age, at least after Boba Fett left.
Pack your things. We're leaving.
The Bad Batch became her first family, and the Marauder is her only home. It's where her room is. In this episode, she's like a kid whose parents are getting divorced. Her home is being torn apart. Heck, her home is literally taken from her. I mean, the Bad Batch understand that they were designed to be transient, but Omega is too young to accept that she's always going to be homeless. Remember, that's why Hunter wanted that big score in episode 1 of this season.
You can have a future. Isn't that what you're after?
So, with all that armchair analysis and meaning out of the way, let's break down this episode. We begin with a little bit of a misdirect. Kevin Kiner's score once again completely changes genres, now going for more of a Western theme. And the visuals of this planet are probably meant to mimic Monument Valley. This is where many classic westerns are set. The area is filled with desert canyons, rock formations, which give it this alien, unexplored feel that's perfect for westerns and for Star Wars. In particular, John Ford was known for filming some of the greatest all-time westerns in this desert, such as Stagecoach and The Searchers, both of which have influenced the visual language of Star Wars from A New Hope all the way through The Mandalorian. The planet also bears a strong resemblance to Arvala 7, the desert planet from The Mandalorian episodes 1 and 2. Now, those episodes were basically a space western. So I expected this episode to be kind of a western. And you know what, maybe the next part of this arc will be, but this one stays focused on the character drama of the bottle episode. The Bad Batch is here to mine Ipsium, a brand new mineral in Star Wars. Like the space fuel coaxium, it is also highly volatile. Now, we of course saw coaxium in Solo, and in The Mandalorian Chapter 15, there was another volatile fuel called rhydonium, which was named after a creator on the show called Your Mom. So they're here to see if Sid's new mine is already played out. Now, this is interesting because it plays on another Western trope, California Gold Rush. In the 1840s, gold was discovered in California, invigorating American expansion to the west. But Arizona also had a similar rush to claim silver mines that didn't pan out quite as well. So many of the towns set up around those mines became ghost towns, like the one that we see at the end of this episode.
And the one the Brady Bunch visited when they went to the Grand Canyon. And then the Bradys were all given tribal names.
Where'd you pull that from?
You were talking about the Brady Bunch earlier, and I guess it was just on my mind.
Fair. So the emotional stakes of this episode center around Echo leaving joining the team, and Omega getting into her feelings about it. And we see that most of the Bad Batch are not able to help her cope. Tech is just useless.
I merely stated the truth.
And Wrecker confronts his emotional pain the way he does his physical pain.
You'll get used to it.
And I don't think the Wrecker and the rest ever really got over Crosshair leaving them, especially once they found out that his chip was removed and that it was all his choice. But losing Crosshair does mean that they're a little more used to losing one of their brothers, so they can better handle Echo's decision. And by the way, the Arabesh here reads Ipsium detected, and here it reads printer scan, artificial structure detected, scan mode, local radius 250 meters, scan perimeter, tier 5 constant. Now, I will say that parts of this episode really irritated me. This is supposed to be an elite group of commandos, and I understand that they had to park far away from the mine entrance, but why would you have Wrecker be the lookout when Hunter is the one with super advanced senses?
Because otherwise, I guess the show just wouldn't happen.
I know, but it's still dumb. So Wrecker lets the ship get stolen, and Hunter even hears the ship take off before anyone else.
What is it, Hunter?
And now Omega has lost the only home that she's ever known. So then they start to walk through these canyons, another classic Western trope when they're suddenly about to get Mufasa'd.
Yes, I like pina coladas.
And you know how much of a badass Wrecker is? He uses his body to shield the explosive mineral from a space stampede.
Yeah, that's pretty bad, but
Right? This is all another incredibly stupid thing in this episode, by the way. The Bad Batch saw the storm approaching, but decided to go off into the narrow canyons anyways. Also, like, was the Marauder locked? Did they leave the keys in the ignition? Would it take like a passcode or an ID scan to even get into the damn thing? I mean, they can't even track the ship.
person, that's just how the Force works.
That's not... Never mind. Okay, bottle episode. It's a bottle episode. So one thing I have really enjoyed about this season is the increased focus on Tech. In season 1, he and Echo were pretty much afterthoughts who had redundant abilities. But in the first couple episodes this season, we saw that old man broaden Tech's viewpoint on his former enemies, the Separatists.
Not separatist. Serenian. We did exist before the war, you know.
I never thought of it like that.
We saw Tech use his math skills to become a race car driver, and now we see that, like Omega, he struggles with his emotions. He can't relate to an emotionally intuitive person like Omega, so he inadvertently hurts her feelings.
This squad existed before Echo was a part of it, and it will exist after. What is your issue?
But they start the road back to healing when he implicitly trusts her to mine the Ipsium herself.
Perhaps you should extract as much Ipsium as you can.
You trust me to do that?
I am fully aware you are capable of the task.
But then she goes that stupid kid in a movie thing where she overreaches and she falls. And you know, she just learned a lesson about not being too greedy while reaching for a treasure while dangling off a high place.
Omega, listen to me. Please. You have to let it go.
But Tech does not hesitate and he jumps in after her, which in a lot of ways is the greatest expression of love and loyalty that he could give to Omega. Tech is the person who always calculates the odds before he does anything. And here, he has no way to make that calculation. He simply decided that if Omega dies, he's going to go with her. It's a very touching moment. It's also pretty baller that Wrecker jumps from this high place because remember, this show keeps reminding us that he's scared of heights.
He's still not better with heights. This is him better. When I'm up real high, I got a problem with gravity.
And then finally, Omega and Tech are alone and trapped. And of course, they're trapped literally in the mine, but also figuratively, they're trapped in their rigid viewpoints of one another. So they escape this emotional trap by relating to one another.
I may process moments and thoughts differently, but it does not mean that I feel any less than you.
And this then allows them to escape their literal trap of the mine.
Typical bottle episode.
That's right. The mine is symbolic of their despair. An emotional catharsis has to be reached before the characters can be released into the wider world. And then, like any family, they have to work together to succeed. After escaping, we're back in our Western setting to find an abandoned ghost town.
Like the one in the Brady Bunch.
Yeah, great job. High five. So they use the abandoned tower to send a transmission to Sid, which has a neat bit of foreshadowing.
Just like we helped you regain control of your parlor from Roland Durand.
Now in the episode Faster, we saw that Tech is starting to not trust Sid, judging her by her former company.
This is not the first time she has required our assistance due to her dealings with individuals of questionable integrity.
And that episode also laid the groundwork for Sid to either turn on the Bad Batch or to just sell them out to the highest bidder.
That loyalty is admirable. But with Sid, it doesn't always go both ways.
It's not the same thing.
Quiet. Now, they do end the episode on a cliffhanger, still stranded on the planet.
Is that it? I mean, nothing happens here, man. What, they're just stuck at the end?
Actually, Doug, a lot happened. For Omega, she learned to embrace the Bad Batch's improvisational style. We saw this in the last episode when they had to start at the Star Destroyer to pull up the data that they needed.
I'm taking a lesson from your squad.
We improvise.
See, Omega is seeking structure, a home, a family, but the Bad Batch can never give her that. Remember, that's what Hunter was trying to give her in Episode 1.
That means numbers and weapons. That's not the kind of life this kid deserves.
Omega is coming to embrace the truth that they will never have a home, and that their lives will be ever-changing, and that will allow the Bad Batch to move on from episodes like this, and maybe finally get pulled into the brewing galactic conflict of clones versus the Empire. Well guys, that's all the Easter eggs I found, but if you found any, let me know your thoughts on the episode down in the comments below, or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.